welcome to the 8th standard class, Social Science. Today we are taking History, Chapter 1, Arrival of European in India. So in this chapter we will read about the European countries, the different countries which arrived in India for trade. So before start this chapter, we have to know about the countries, we have to know about the people who came in India. First, during the 15th century to 17th century, all the European countries reached in our country. First, Portuguese, they came from Portugal. Then Dutch came from Holland, now it is called Netherlands. Then Danish from Denmark, British came from England, and the last one, French, came from France. So according to this list, we can understand that first European, Portuguese, first were who came in our country were Portuguese, they came from Portugal, and the last Europeans were French, who arrived in our country to trade. So these were the European countries who arrived in our country to trade with India. When during the ancient time, our country was so prosperous country, it was the most prosperous country among the world, and the people from the different countries, they wanted to take advantage of the prosperity and the culture of our country. So they wanted to come in our country and trade with it, and they wanted to become wealthy also. For that purpose only the peoples discovered the different routes. So first they trade by the land route. So the Arab countries, they trade northwest to in our country, and after that when the land route was stopped, then they discovered sea route to our country. So who discovered sea route? Names are given here. First I have to read from the chapter what is given here. We have learnt in the previous standard that many years ago our country was one of the leading country. As I told that our country was the prosperous country. So it was the leading country in the world. Our country was distinct. It was different among the all countries. It has the many good culture. So it was influenced. The people were influenced by our country. So distinct in the whole world, the people of the various countries were being influenced by our culture and prosperity. Many people worldwide were eager to enter into the trade with our country and earn wealth out of it. Most of the countries, the neighboring countries, they wanted to come in our country and want to become wealthy, and they want to earn wealth from our country, our prosperity. They wanted to take advantage from it. Next, earlier the merchants from the various countries came to India from the northwest by the land route. They started trade through the land route starting in earlier time for the purpose of trading. For years the Arab trades undertook trade through the land route, but as situation changed, time was passed, then the situation were changed, so they changed their route also. Trade through the land route stopped. Consequently, the demand for the Indian commodities like silk, cotton and muslin, and spices like clove and pepper, these were in great demand in European countries. So these Europeans wanted to come in our country and trade with us, because these commodities, these things were the central attraction in our country. So they wanted to come in our country. To take the advantage of the situations, many countries of the Europe started searching for a sea route to India. So that's why they start searching sea route to come in India. So first person was Christopher Columbus, who tried first, and the next Vasco da Gama. So according to the book given here, Christopher Columbus was an Italian explorer. He was an Italian sailor and was one of the brave sailors who ventured out to find the sea route to India. Columbus started his journey to India and accidentally reached America. Yes, definitely he started his journey to India, but coincidentally he reached to America. But he has the misbelief, he has a misbelief that he reached to India. So उसको यही इसको यही मिसबिलीफ था, इसको ये गलत फहमी थी कि वो कहाँ पहुँच गया है, वो इंडिया पहुँच गया, पर एक्चुअली ही रीच टू अमेरिका. As long as he lived, he was under the misconception. Misconception means misbelief, misunderstanding, galat fahmi. So that he had discovered to sea route to India, कि जैसे कि वो sea route to India he has discovered, but actually he didn't discovered India. Hence, even today the native of America are called the Red Indians, and the island group in the Caribbean is known as the West Indies. So he reached to America. So that's why the people of America, the native of America are called the Red Indians, and some of them, the island group of America, are called the West Indies, means West Indies, Indians. Next was Vasco da Gama. He reached America 1492 and Vasco da Gama reached 1498. Vasco da Gama, he was a Portuguese sailor. Portuguese first discover sea route. So Vasco da Gama, a native of the Portugal, discovered the sea route to India. He encircled the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. He make a round around the South Africa. He crossed through the Indian Ocean. Then he reached India. Then reached the port of Calicut. First, where he reached in India? Calicut. He reached at Calicut on 22nd May. And this 1498. After crossing the Indian Ocean, then the ruling king of the Calicut, Zamarin, gave permission to the Portuguese to trade. When he reached India, when he reached at Calicut, they established their fort at the Calicut and get permission from the ruler. That time Zamarin was the ruler at the Calicut, so he gave permission to them. The Portuguese established a fort in Calicut, the trade in 1500 CE, and they fortified it. They appointed a commander-in-chief, namely Albuquerque, to safeguard the fort. Then they appoint a commander-in-chief in Calicut so that they can be safe this fort. इस fort को वो लोग safe रख सके at Calicut, so they appoint a commander-in-chief. Then within the span of the 100 years, yes, they spent their 100 years here. Portuguese spent 100 years in our country. Almost 100 years span they took in our country. The Portuguese took control. Where they took control? First Calicut, then Goa, then Diu, then Daman, Mumbai, and the islands of Lanka. On these places they took control and they start trade with these places in our country. End of the Portuguese rule. Now how the end of the Portuguese rule was there in our country? In the beginning of the 17th century, the Portuguese expanded their trade to Bengal. Yes, they already have set up their force, their trade on these places, but now they wanted to set up their trade Bengal. Now they wanted to trade in Bengal area. So that time Shah Jahan ruled in India from Delhi. The Subedar of Bengal complained the Shah Jahan about the behavior of Portuguese. Portuguese were not well behaved. So in Bengal, Subedar complained to Shah Jahan. जाकर complain कर दी, they are not behaving well in our area Bengal. So don't give permission to them to trade with this area. Shah Jahan about the behavior of the Portuguese. Thus the Fort of Hooghly. Yes, in Bengal they start establishing their fort on the bank of the river Hooghly. Then Subedar complained to Shah Jahan that their behavior is not good in their area. They were disturbing. Then Shah Jahan ordered to demolish these forts. इनको demolish कर दो, damage कर दो. So he ordered. Thus the fort of Hooghly was demolished and the ships were burnt as per the order of the emperor. In this way, Portuguese rule came to an end. So, because of this Bengal expand, they lost their trade in our country. But even then, they set up their trade with these areas, Goa, Daman, Diu, Mumbai, islands. Next, who arrived in our country? Dutch. Dutch from Holland. After 100 years of the arrival of the Portuguese at the end of the 16th century, the Dutch of Holland came to India for the trade. Initially, they established fort at Pulicat, Dutch. They established their fort, their trade centers, first Pulicat, then Chennai, and then Agra. So these three places you have to learn, these also you have to learn, and the dates also you have to learn. Okay, so Pulicat, Chennai, and they also established trading center at the Agra in the year 1663. Meanwhile, the British who arrived in our country, in between they were set up their trade in our country. Then in the meanwhile, British came from England. They also established trading center at Agra, and meanwhile British also arrived in our country, and the Dutch could not withstand the competition against the British because the British were the strong. So Dutch could not stand in the competition with the British. So they have to left the country. Now who start trade in our country? British. British interested in India. During the reign of the Queen Elizabeth of the England in the year 1600, the British established the East India Company. They set up their company under the ruling power of the Queen Elizabeth, and they set up their company in 1600 CE, and it was called British East India Company. And this company belonged to merchants who wanted to increase their wealth by undertaking trade with India. It means the company, there were the people, there were the merchants and the traders who wanted to trade with India. So it was the group of the traders. The first British ship arrived in India at the port of Surat in 1608. In 16 CE, British East India Company was set up, and in 1608 CE, first Englishman arrived in our country. Who was that man? The captain of, and they arrived at the port of Surat. And the captain of that ship was Hawkins, W. Hawkins. The captain of the ship was the first British to set foot in India. This Hawkins was the first Englishman who set his foot in our country. Therefore, Sir Thomas Roy arrived in India for the acquired of the permission of established trading center in Surat. They wanted to trade in Surat. They get permission from Jahangir because Jahangir was the emperor that time, and established trading center in Surat. Later, Delhi went into the hands of Shah Jahan. That time Jahangir was ruler. After some times, when Shah Jahan became the ruler from Delhi, then Shah Jahan gave permission to British to carry out trade in Bengal also. They start their trade in Surat. Then with the permission of Shah Jahan, they get permission to carry out their trade with Bengal. The French. So they had starting their setup in our country. In between, French arrived in our country. They reached in our country. The French established the French East India Company in the year 1664. Again the same like British set up their British East India Company in 1600. In the same way, French set up the French East India Company in 1664. In 1664, they set up their company to trade with our country. And they established factory in Surat, Machilipatnam, Pondicherry. The head of the French company, Joseph Dupleix, who had the desire to expand the European rule in India, this French company, they wanted to set up their rule. They want to expand their trade in our country. So again British and French were in a tough competition. So thus the French and the British stood in the competition against each other to become the strongest European company. There were various disputes and the battles. Finally British emerged as the winner. तो कौन इनमें से विनर हुआ दोनों में, जब दोनों साथ में हमारी कंट्री में ट्रेड कर रहे थे? As the Britishers were stronger, so they were victorious in our country. Next, British trade in Bengal. We will continue this topic in our next session because it all is new for you. So you learn it. Till then, keep watching, keep learning. Bye.